Welcome, friends. Welcome to another edition of Freeing the Body, Freeing the Soul. I'm your host, Dr. David, the Cutting Edge Doc, and here on Freeing the Body, Freeing the Soul, we do in-depth interviews with individuals that are doing cutting-edge work in the areas of healing and spirituality and social transformation. I'm very excited about today's show. Today is going to be the first in a series of shows that I'm going to be doing with a new friend of mine named Matthew Perry. And for those of you who've been following...
Matthew Ferry.
Oh, excuse me.
That's
It's
okay.
actually Matthew Ferry. That's right.
But yeah, maybe I could be a TV star too.
Right. Matthew Ferry, like the ferry boat. And for those of you who've been following me for a long time, you know that one of the things I love to do and one of my superpowers is that I have a really good nose for great stuff. Great people, great books, great ideas, great practices, and it's one of my joys to connect with people that are doing great work and to help you to connect with them in powerful ways. And so we're going to begin a series, actually, of conversations with Matthew, and this will be the first one. And let me give you a little bit of background about my connection with Matthew before I bring him in to the conversation and give you a chance to get to know him. And he can start by telling you a little bit about his journey. So just to give you a little bit of context, about a year or two ago, I felt that there was a disconnect between what I was feeling inside and what was coming through my body. And I know my body really well. And I had a strong suspicion that at age 61 or 62, that my testosterone levels were slipping. And I was trying to get them up with nutrition and herbs and lifestyle changes, and it really wasn't happening. And I knew that the whole bioidentical hormone world is fraught with a lot of charlatans and nonsense, and playing around with hormones, you're playing with fire. And so I was very cautious, and I finally found a mentor in that area named Jay Campbell, who was able to guide me somewhat directly and then also indirectly by connecting me with some really good doctors. And I was able to get on a really excellent program to assist me in that area. And that's been very, very helpful to me. And through my connection with Jay Campbell, we have an interest in spirituality, a common interest. And we both were fans of Dr. David R. Hawkins, and then through our mutual interest in David Hawkins and spirituality, Jay turned me on to Matthew Ferry, who definitely has a body of work in his own right, but part of his journey was also connecting with the teachings of Dr. David R. Hawkins, and so I started to check Matthew and his workout. We made a connection, kind of an instant old soul connection. And Matthew was kind enough to share with me an advanced copy of his new book that's out now. And I realized immediately that this was an important piece of work that, so many spiritual teachers and spiritual guides and metaphysicians and people that promote themselves as helping people to perform better. So much of what they're offering for me at this point in my journey is either really boring, or it's very sophomoric, or it's just downright dangerous. And occasionally I come across something that really is breaking some new ground. And, so many people today are starting to get hip to the idea about survival consciousness, surviving versus thriving, and that's kind of becoming a common idea. But there are very few people that actually will help you to not only understand the game that's going on, but also be able to help you access step by step, once you understand what's going on, how you can translate that into practices in daily living and speaking that will make real for you the possibilities that all of these teachers are talking about. And after getting exposed to Matthew's material, it was obvious to me that Matthew has done the work and he's doing the work, and he's a student first, which makes the best teachers. And so I'm really moved to not only in my own life learn from Matthew, but also to share Matthew with my whole tribe. And so that's the impetus for these series of conversations. And so with that preamble, let me formally bring Matthew Ferry into the conversation. Matthew, welcome to Freeing the Body, Freeing the Soul.
Thanks for having me here, David. I'm pretty excited to share with your group and your tribe, and hopefully what we can do today is make a difference, get people into a place where they are experiencing more peace, more joy, more flow, so that they can create their own epic life.
Well, you kind of set me up there at the end there. So I can't go any further without asking you to define for all of us what you mean when you talk about an epic life.
I think it's individual for everybody. I have been in the personal coaching, personal transformation, business leadership, et cetera, category of mentor for a long, long time now. And what I've noticed is whether I'm working with a CEO on Wall Street, or I'm working with a mom who wants to just have a happier life, in the end, all we're looking for is having an incredible experience here on the planet. And whatever that is for you is going to be your version of an epic life. Everybody has their own version of that. But I think that it really comes down to what turns you on, what makes you happy, what makes you feel good. And those things are not accessible if you're in a survival state. If the survival mind is controlling your experience of reality, then you're not going to be in a place where you can be happy, thriving, lit up, enjoying life, and experiencing what I call the epic life.
Why do you think for so many people it's so challenging to even reconnect with what they really want?
Well, I think it's biological. I think that each of us is born predisposed to a set of conditions that are present in our biology, in the culture, in the environment, the conditions that we're in. And I suspect that your listener is like us. You have, from the beginning of your life, you've known that life could be better. Life could be more enriching, more fulfilling, more peaceful, more joyous. You just had that built in. And of course, you were born with no tools. The environment contradicted you. The people around you were, in essence, in a constant state of some kind of conflict or feeling uncomfortable or uneasy, et cetera, And so it takes a lot to be optimistic and believe that you can achieve. And I think that there's two types of achievement that are going on right now, David. There's the type of achievement that goes on that is sort of like, in spite of all odds, I'm gonna overcome all the negativity. I'm gonna prove to the world that I'm good enough. There's that kind of achievement, which is certainly the most common. Most of the people that I work with who are extraordinarily successful, they have achieved as a way of proving that they're good enough. And of course, they are now multi-millionaires or billionaires, and they still feel insecure and like they're not good enough. But then there's this new kind of achievement that has been popping up. And this new kind of achievement is really much more from an enlightened perspective. And that is the recognition that we are all the creative expression of the background field of energy and information. Scientists call this the quantum field. And that energy and information is organizing itself. It's self-organizing, and you and I are a result of that self-organization, and it's creating. And when you and I get to a place where we are completely free from fear, we can just embrace the creative energy that is coming through us. And suddenly we want to write goals. We want to set intentions. We want to create things, not because we need to, not because it's going to make life better, but because that's who we are.
Right. And as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking that probably my listeners and viewers have heard that 100 times before.
Yeah.
And so what I want to get at, what I want to get at in this series of conversations is there's something about your work that consistently, elegantly builds bridges for people between that as a great set of ideas and an as-lived experience. And, you know, like anybody that is really good at something, you make it look easy, but there's a lot to it. There's a lot of elements and components and distinctions and experimentation that's gone into you being where you are now as a guide for people. And so let's use that sort of idea and tone as a segue to invite you to kind of take the show for a while in your hands. And I'd like you to tell your story in a purposeful way that will help people to connect with you more deeply, and also set the stage for further conversation that dives more deeply into some of the key elements and distinctions that make your work what it is.
Perfect. Okay, great. Well, I think it started for me when I was young, you know, about 9 years old. I found myself a kid with asthma. My parents were divorced. I was extremely sensitive and a creative type. And I would have these asthma attacks, and my mom would put me underneath the table in the kitchen and put blankets all over the table, literally creating this little tent for me, and humidifier, a light, created a little bed. And so, you know, here I was under the table, like trying to breathe, and the hum of the humidifier, and I'm reading a book and really having to breathe very, very deliberately to get every single breath. And one day I was reading a book and literally felt like I popped out of my body and was 100 feet above my book. And I'm 9 years old. I have no idea what this is. I don't know. I don't understand it, but the feeling is so unbelievably good. It's like filled me with ecstasy, filled me with joy. The pleasure, David, that I felt was so intense, it can't be described. And I remember the first time that it happened, and the ecstasy of it, and then boom, it was gone. And I remember, bursting into tears and just, how do I get back there again? Because it was this place. It happened to me several times when I was young, and it was this place that you just knew that all is well, that everything that we believed was BS, and that the entire reality, was overwhelmed with this idea. All the rules that we were following, all of the protocols that we were adhering to were a lie. They weren't real. They weren't true. But I'm 9, right? So what am I going to do about it? Nothing.
Did it occur to you at age 9 in the way you're describing it now?
Yeah, that I literally in that moment knew that all rules were a lie, and that's been the theme of my life, and that everything that I was all of these protocols, these social protocols, these ways that we're supposed to behave with each other, and how we're supposed to operate. I just had this incredible feeling that it wasn't true, it wasn't real. And but like I said, a 9-year-old, how does a 9-year-old deal with that? The 9-year-old has no clue what to do. So I had no power. I mean, all my entire life was based on whatever my parents wanted me to do. And so like any rebellious person, I did everything that I could. I even I started reading about spiritual things. I went and got my first communion. Both my parents were Catholic when they were growing up, so I thought, well, all right, well, maybe it's there. And so I went and got my first communion. Of course, you can imagine the first communion teacher, what a nightmare it would be to have me in the class as I'm questioning everything that she is saying. But that didn't do it. Then I tried astral travel. I tried moving things with my mind. I tried, meditation. I tried all of these things. And then as a teen, I just went completely bonkers. Sex, drugs. I was, being a rock star, traveling around the country, trying to, impress people with my music and whatnot. And then in my 20s, I kind of went out of that phase. I found my father. And when I say I found him, I mean, he was always there, but I actually found him. Like, we got together and he took me under his wing and started mentoring me. And my father is a long time personal development leader. And his mentor was a man named Earl Nightingale. And Earl Nightingale, of course, one of the grandfathers of the personal development industry. My father was a real estate sales trainer. And so he started to just feed me mentor after mentor, book after book, audio after audio, seminar after seminar, private sessions, consultants. I mean, you name it. But I remember this one moment. He had brought this guy in, his name was Howard Lee, I think, and he was a spiritual, just like a spiritual healer, I guess. And I had one of those moments where in his presence, I was like, here it is again. This is that state. And that sparked me. I mean, I was so thirsty, so hungry trying to figure this out. And I'll tell you that success didn't do it. Money didn't do it. I've made tens of millions of dollars in my lifetime, and all it led to was more emptiness. And I highly recommend making a lot of money. I just want you to know that. I want people to be prosperous and have their life be easy. So I'm not against making a lot of money in any way. But what I found was that didn't get me where I wanted to go. It was when I engaged a teacher named Stephen Sadleir, and Stephen was a Shaktipat meditation teacher, and he took me into some states that were just absolutely extraordinary. And when I went with him to Tibet, we did a 17-day meditation retreat in Tibet. And that was the moment for me. That was when my mind went completely silent. And the ecstasy was just extraordinary. But here's the thing. The ecstasy was extraordinary in Tibet, David. Then I came home and the ecstasy evaporated very, very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, there's that old joke, if you want to really see where you're at, go visit your family.
Yeah, go have Thanksgiving dinner, right? So my life did not make any sense after that. I mean, I came home and literally nothing made sense to me anymore. The way that I had operated, I realized that in becoming a personal development, in essence, master, I had mastery at that time of the personal development tool sets. In becoming a master of those tool sets and becoming an effective, successful young man, I think I was in my, early 30s at that time, I realized that essentially what I did was I took all the rules, I tried to break them, and it's sort of like a teenager, right? A teenager wants to be an individual. So what do? They go join another group. And that's
Right.
essentially what I did. I threw out all those rules, started following a new set of rules. And when I came back from Tibet, I realized, wow, my life was literally a set of rules that were about creating the illusion that my external life represented my internal life.
Right.
And it didn't. My external life represented the life of sort of greedy, success-driven, pompous, arrogant jackass. And so that led me in a whole new direction. Now, somewhere in there, we had a mastermind group with Wayne Dyer, and he wasn't in the mastermind group. He was our speaker. And Wayne basically said to all of us, look, there is one book that has really, really impacted me lately, and I really want you to buy it. And it was Power versus Force. And I was like, wow, is there an audiobook? I'm not a big reader, to be honest with you. I like audiobooks. That's my thing. And there's no audiobook. It's just the book. So I buy this book and I read it, and I am literally blown away. I'm like a success coach who is having this spiritual experience. And suddenly here's David Hawkins saying, here is essentially a success modality applied to spirituality. Let's measure and monitor, and let's use metrics to understand where we are in the process of our spiritual journey. It blew my mind. I was so stoked. It was literally the first book that I ever read twice. So there are not many books that I've read multiple times. That one I read literally. I completed it and I was like, whoa. And I started right back at the beginning again.
Could I interrupt for a minute?
Yeah, do it.
A couple of questions have come up for me so far. One is, as you were going through this phase of your spiritual journey, did you have any outer world relationship type of support in a supportive community, or were you pretty much the Lone Ranger?
Well, I think there's two parts to it. So one, I had Stephen was mentoring me, and that was extraordinarily valuable. Two, I was the Lone Ranger because my entire community was success-driven entrepreneurs and salespeople who, their entire philosophy was once you make enough money. I apologize that my phone is giving me notifications. Let me turn that off. Once you make enough money, then you're going to be happy and stoked and lit up. And I had made a lot of money, and it did not actually impact my happiness. In fact, it made my life more complex, and the complexity presented a tremendous amount of challenge.
I understand.
Yeah.
The reason I asked that question is because, I've been in the role of teacher, healer, guide for a long time too. And one of the things that I found is that there's only a small percentage of people, very small percentage of people, that can really stay on the path in a powerful way without any type of community support. In Buddhism, there's an old saying that when the going gets tough on the path, there's three places where you can take refuge. And in Buddhism, they call those three the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha. And so the translation of that in regular English is that when the going gets tough for the spiritual student, they can take refuge in the Buddha, which is the living example of the teacher, the Dharma, or the teachings that have stood the test of time, like the perennial philosophy, the truth teachings, and the Sangha is the sincere community of fellow travelers on the path. And, you go back to biology, a lot of us are still pack animals to some extent.
I don't think any of us have escaped being a
Yeah,
pack animal.
right. And so in my experience, there's some people that are more influenced by their social environment than others. But what I've discovered over decades is that most people require the alchemy of all three. And one of the things I was wondering is you seem to be a person who would be more on the side of the scale where you could have been one of those rare people that to a large extent maybe didn't need a lot of community. Um, but I'm sure you're aware in your own teaching world journey that many do. And uh, I'm curious if that has framed or you think will frame the type of systems and structures that you provide for your students, especially the ones that are really taking your teaching seriously.
I think so. First of all, as I reflect on your question, the answer is yes. I always had community around me of people who were fellow travelers and going for it. I almost always gravitated towards those mentors who were much more wise and down the path than I was at the time. But I will tell you that there was probably about a 5-year period. I had started to become aware of that consciousness wasn't just human. The consciousness actually had that human was nothing more than like a bay in the ocean. That the only reason that we call it human is we distinguish it, but really the bay is both the land and the ocean, and human is the same thing. Human is that there's a physical electromagnetic quality to human, self-organizing quality to human, but then there's also a pervasive energetic aspect of human. And in the field of energy that human resides, there's all kinds of phenomenon that are there. And what was so empowering for me was to utilize the muscle testing to begin to identify what are these aspects of consciousness, and how are these aspects of consciousness affecting how I'm seeing things, my mood, my ups, my downs, et cetera, et cetera. There was a period of time, David, where I went back to my mentor, Stephen, and I said, Stephen, I'm having these experiences where I'm getting present to all kinds of different things that aren't necessarily what we would delineate as that's a human, or that's a human experience. And he's a Hindu type guy, and that just didn't connect with him. And I had to literally go on my own for a while. And there was a good 5-year period where what I had was silence, 4 or 5 hours of meditation a day, and muscle testing to verify the experience that I was having. And this book, Eye of the I. This book, you can see I have destroyed this book, reading it like crazy. That's all taped up to try and keep it together. But, those things, Eye of the I, just reading and studying it, meditation, 4 or 5 hours at a time per day, and verifying things with the strength and weakness of muscle testing to discern what is this disturbance? Why does my mind want to talk? Why is my mind trying to protect? Why is the mind of this other individual over here that I'm interacting with, why is that person doing that? And after I transitioned through that period, I began to organize groups myself. I started to say, like, look at this interesting stuff that I'm starting to discern. Who wants to come and discuss, test, play, verify, try and help me to create that system, that process that we can all utilize to rapidly ascend and go from what I would call a disturbed survival state into an undisturbed enlightened state. And to me, that's what enlightenment is. Enlightenment is just being undisturbed, just
Right.
being.
What I love about your work is that it comes out of a relentless commitment to live inside that question you were asking, is what's driving this disturbance? Not just describing the disturbance. A lot of people, psychologists, spiritual teachers, self-help people, they've done a pretty good job of describing the disturbance, but that doesn't seem to make much of a difference.
It
And
does. It does a little bit, right? Because
a little bit, a little
awareness
bit.
makes you flexible. Flexibility reveals new options, and options give you power. So awareness is valuable, but it's not the whole deal.
No, I mean, we all know people that have been in therapy for many, many years, and they can do a really good job of describing their disturbances.
Yeah.
But it's not making a difference in the quality of their life or the effectiveness in their life. And you and I are both sort of connoisseurs and lovers of the power of context and putting that on the map for people. And so I've always been fascinated with that question of what's driving the monkey mind? What's driving that incessant movement to survive this imaginary separate sense of self? And obviously one big idea that gets you in the door is this whole distinction of survival of this supposed separate entity. And then you look at that in the context of genetics and biology and sociology, and you get in the door. But what strikes me about your work is that, and I really get that it didn't develop from a theory. I get that it really developed organically from your own inquiry into your own world.
And David, and
You've
also,
developed a
David,
very
it's not
powerful.
just not my inquiry, buddy. It's also, remember, I have been a personal coach, success coach, etc., business coach since 1993. I've coached literally thousands and thousands of people, and it was also with that vast amount of experience of trying to get people to actually do stuff. That also was a tremendous benefit to my process.
Right, but there are a lot of other experienced success coaches that didn't do what you did.
That's true.
And so there's a blending of that database combined with this context and where you were looking from and your commitment. And from reading your new book and some other PDFs, what strikes me is that you've developed a very sophisticated yet simple in certain ways model that provides a set of distinctions that lets people eat this big elephant one bite at a time, and then allows them to identify where the action is for them, the weakest link in the chain at that moment, and then helps them to do something about it. And I want to invite you, to whatever extent you're guided to do that, to begin to share with our tribes here um, some of the key elements of this model that's organically percolating.
Sure, I'd love to. Uh, Ultimately, what has come about in this process, just to give it some context, initially, I have been a hired gun. My job has essentially been to help effective people get really effective, and I've never been a guy who's tried to help really dysfunctional people get effective. My model, for some reason, has been for people like you, or people like, I'm sure, the ones that are listening here, which are people who, they've already been down the road. They've already read all the books. They've already gone through all the processes, and they've gone through the seminars and the weekend retreats and all of that stuff. And they're saying, okay, but wait, I still don't feel like I'm there yet. I still don't feel like I have optimized my existence. So as a person who has been accountable to support people in really getting to that place where they feel optimized and they feel like I've made it, I developed what is essentially a 4-part system to help them to get there. And I call that system the Rapid Enlightenment process. And the Rapid Enlightenment process has 4 components. The first one is an awareness of the unconscious reflexes of the drunk monkey. And for me, I call it the drunk monkey because when I was about 21 years old or something like that, I was reading Jose Silva or listening to an audio or something like that. And Jose mentioned the idea that it was the monkey mind. And, I was born in the Judeo-Christian community, so I didn't have a lot of connection to the Eastern vernacular and language. So I didn't know about the monkey mind, but I definitely knew I had one. And, I was like a partying, crazy rock star guy at that time, and thought to myself, well, my mind's not I don't have a monkey mind. I have a drunk monkey. My monkey is wasted. And that just stuck. So I started telling my clients and my friends and whatnot that I had a drunk monkey in my head, and it was grammatically incorrect. It should be the drunken monkey, but I just told so many people about the drunk monkey, somewhere around maybe 1991, I started talking about that. So that's what I call it, the drunk monkey. And the drunk monkey has, currently we have a list of 12 unconscious reflexes that we have been able to identify. And it's just like any other reflex, right? If you're driving along in your car and you look up in the rear view mirror and you see police lights, your physiology has a response whether you want it to or not. If you're about to step into the street and a car comes whizzing by, whom, your physiology has a reflex. And your mentation, the mental framework that you have, has a reflex as well. And there are 12 unconscious reflexes. In my new book, I go through and distinguish 6 of those for you because those are sort of the primary 6. But think about it like this. It's things like forecasting the negative. The mind literally defaults to the negative because that's its job. And if you believe that your mind is psychic, then you will have a life that is filled with broken expectations, and you will have a tendency to draw to you those things that are not very positive and uplifting, because what you focus on, you create. You influence the probabilities through your focus. So there are many of the unconscious reflexes. We can certainly go through those later, but let me tell you the 4 components of the Rapid Enlightenment process. 1, you must be able to distinguish the unconscious reflexes of the drunk monkey. 2, you have to figure out what's driving the drunk monkey. The thing that shocked me is that in my meditation and then later with verification of the muscle testing modality that I've been working with, I started to realize that consciousness itself has programming and is a part of the self-organizing nature that creates human beings. And consciousness keeps iterating and evolving. And over the millennia, many different parts of the survival framework have been woven into the fabric of all the different species here on Earth, not just human being. For, being a victim, for example, the victim consciousness is a hidden motive to survive. And so many of us play the victim role and we don't even know why, but I will tell you why. It works. It 100% causes the people around you, causes the alpha in the group to have more compassion for you or to try and take care of you. It's a very effective strategy. And the hidden motives to survive are a part of consciousness. So yes, they are human, and yes, they are mental, but they actually are a part of the fabric, the information that creates a human experience. And unless you can spot the hidden motives to survive and then correct the imbalance, because it is just an imbalance. You're not in a survival situation, yet you're utilizing survival frameworks. So that's out of balance. That creates a disturbance. So unless you can spot those, correct the imbalances, heal the process, you're not going to get the mind to stop talking. And I suspect that so many of your viewers and listeners have had the experience of you go to a meditation retreat and you are so blissful, or you go to a weekend retreat and you feel so happy and so good. And then you get home and literally, boom, you're triggered right back into those mental disturbances and craziness, and the mind is starting to, that guy, and then, what about work, and what's on your to-do list, and just unwanted, uninvited chatter disturbing your peace. Underneath that are 10 hidden motives to survive. And when you go through the process of finding and correcting the imbalances of those hidden motives, your mind will literally go to silent, and it'll go to silent in your normal everyday life. And when it goes to silent, whoa, your power to create, to be in a resourceful state is off the charts. So one, you got to see the drunk monkey. You have to know about its unconscious reflexes. Two, you have to understand what triggers the drunk monkey, which are the hidden motives to survive. Then three, you utilize a modality called muscle testing to pierce through the denial mechanism. So the system that we live in is sort of locked down into a set of beliefs and ideas that they're not really, you can't permeate them using just your mind. The mind is the thing that created it in the first place. So you can't correct the mind by using the mind. So there's this externalized tool that I was first introduced to by Dr. Hawkins, but certainly he was not the inventor of it. I mean, the muscle testing modality has been around in the medical community and the intuitive healing community for decades and decades, but maybe even longer. I don't really know. But you use the muscle testing as a way of discerning, is this a strengthening context for me, or is this a weakening context for me? And what I found, David, is that our mind talks because we are weak. And I'm not saying we're weak, like you're weak and you should be strong. No, I mean literally weak. The physiology is not functioning in an optimal fashion. And when the physiology isn't functioning in an optimal fashion, it's weakened in some way, it's compromised in some way. the security system, the survival system kicks in to compensate. And one of your systems for compensation is mentation. It is the talking in your head. And the talking in your head is about survival. If there's talking going on in your head and you didn't ask for it to come, it's a survival system that's in play. And so the piercing through the veil of denial allows you to literally bust ideas and frameworks that are unintegrous for your system. It's very powerful. That's the third step. And then the fourth step is the practice of recontextualization. And recontextualization is the skill of describing the conditions and circumstances of your life in a way that create an empowering reality for you. And this is a skill because you can't count on the mind to create an empowering reality. The mind is always going to create a reality that has a defensive posture in it. Even the most optimistic person, when we utilize the muscle testing, the distinguishing of the hidden motives, and the drunk monkey, when we utilize those three frameworks, it is very easy to see that most of our super optimistic friends, which those are the kinds of people that we would have in our life, those people are actually in denial about the level of survival that is driving their optimism, that their optimism is actually a compensation.
And that was going to be my question is, their sort of comment question, and that is that to the extent that the positive thinking is a forceful attempt to compensate for a lousy state of being, that's a completely different animal than what you're talking about now. What you're talking about, the recontextualization, you're not talking about it as a compensation for not doing the work. You're talking about it as an act of creation when you've created some space.
Yeah, I will say it in this way. I have found that the most effective thing that you can do as a human being who recognizes that you are in a thriving state, but can't seem to get yourself to live like that, the most effective thing for you to do is to remove the motivation to think. And when you remove the motivation to think, and the mind will then just naturally go quiet. Now, as soon as the mind goes quiet, you're going to be confronted. You're going to be confronted with an issue that you have and that you didn't know you had. And that is that everything that you use to describe the way that you're living is actually a compensation for being in a survival situation. So all the language that you have literally becomes a prison that you're living inside of. Your language traps you. So recontextualization is a skill set that you must develop. You must actually learn to describe things in an entirely new way that actually create the freedom that you're experiencing, because you are in a free state. You are actually predominantly unlimited, unbounded. Now, it's not like in every category, right? I'm probably never going to be a basketball player. That's not my propensity. Right. You know what I'm saying? That's not what this physiology is about. But the dominant limitations that I experience are in relationship to what I feel is possible for me. So I feel that there's all of these possible expressions that I could be having. And I also experience limitation. And it turns out that the limitation comes from the context. And thus
right. I'm just trying to get at this distinction that I don't want viewers and listeners to hear you talk about this fourth step of changing your languaging and putting it in a box that's kind of like um, common metaphysics and affirmations or fake it till you make it. You're not talking about that.
Mm-mm.
And so I want to really draw that out, because from where a lot of people could be listening from, that there could be that conflation. And so I want to really give you a chance to, from many different angles, help people to get that that's not what you're talking about.
Okay, great. Well, typically, recontextualization is most effectively demonstrated when you have a person who they have an issue that makes them feel limited, and then they describe that issue, and then we practice describing it in a much more rational fashion. And it starts by recognizing, oh wow, okay, so let's for example, let's do it. This is an example that's in my book. One of my clients very comes from a very successful family, and she's a mom, and she's sort of in a society where it's about, like, where do your children go to school and who do they run with and what, blah, 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 right? And there's a lot of value in that. Setting your children up is a phenomenal thing. But what she found was she was in a perpetual state of feeling conflicted, because she had this set of ideas about what it meant to be a mom, but then she had a set of like inspirations about what she could do to be a mom, and they were constantly in conflict. And she was afraid that if she actually taught her children to do what she was thinking, that they might be compromised or in danger in some way. And what we had to do was identify that underneath there was a hidden motive to survive running, and that hidden motive to survive we call illogical rules. And once we went through and figured out all of her illogical rules, she literally wrote them all out for me. And then one by one, we went through, right? So it's like, my children must come home and do their homework first. And then the question is like, well, why? Who says that they have to do that? My children need to do well in school if they're going to do well in life. Oh, really? And who says that, and why do they say that, and how does that apply to you? You go through this process of essentially deconstructing all the rules that you're following, and then ultimately, once you come to a place of neutrality, then you start your recontextualization. And her recontextualization went something like this: I realize that society has created best practices to ensure that young human beings come up the ranks and are able to do well and contribute to society. And I am really grateful to be living in a society that has such an intense amount of organization that my children really, if I went completely unconscious, my children would probably still do very, very well. And I also realized that I am a conscious human being. I realized that I'm someone who has ideas, and I have new, interesting things that I want to express. And I feel very strongly that my children could get a great advantage from me being my authentic self. And I also admit I have no idea how to do that, because I have been so programmed to follow the rules and be a genetic meat puppet. Raise these babies so that they can be successful in the world. And it is through this recognition that I am going to begin to experiment with putting some of my ideas to the test and see what the results are. I don't know if what I will do will work. I just have an idea. I'm just like anybody else, but I'm going to be a scientist. I'm going to be a mom scientist, and I'm going to put some of these ideas to the test to see what the impact is on my kids. I'm not saying that I'm right, and I'm not saying that I'm wrong. I'm saying I have no idea. All I'm saying is I have been programmed to believe that there's a right way to raise children and a wrong way. And that doesn't hold up for me. So I'm going to begin to play and experiment. So that's just on the fly.
That's great. That is a great example that gets at what I wanted to get at. One question that comes up is obviously the value of that step is based on the other steps being done, to a certain level of excellence. And that brings up the question, because I'm all about access.
Good.
And not that high a percentage of people will ever have the opportunity to necessarily hire you as a coach one-on-one like this woman did. So how can people who won't have you as a coach like that, how can they still access and benefit from your work in a powerful way?
Well, obviously, I wrote the book specifically for that. So Quiet Mind, Epic Life is a terrific way for you to at least introduce yourself to all the concepts. But then one of the things that I've really devoted myself to, David, is starting to build the platform to give people as much access as I possibly can to everything that I have without holding anything back. And I've got several things that I've created, several structures, and many more to come. The ultimate structure, I think Kristen and I are working in the background on putting together what we're going to call the Center for Rapid Enlightenment. And this will, our objective.
I got the chills when you said that.
Yeah.
That feels right.
Yeah, it feels right to us too. And I think long-term, our objective is to create a structured way where people can come into the center, whether that's a local or non-local thing that we create, and go through the process of getting to a state of enlightenment. And enlightenment for me is just the recognition that the source of life within you is the source of life for everyone and everything, and that we're all one thing expressing itself with infinite variety. Sort of at the fundamental level, enlightenment is the recognition that all is well. And when you are in a state of all is well, everything works. So we're working on the center in the background. I don't know exactly when we're going to be launching that, but in the meantime, here's what we've done. We do live events, Epic Life Live and Rapid Enlightenment retreats. Those are certainly things people can participate in. But we also have a Facebook group called Spiritual Hooligans, and we'd love to have people join us there. And we're in some very deep discussions there. We have created many free trainings and whatnot for people to go through. So if people wanted to, they could go to MatthewFerry.com/motives. And in that, if they just literally will download the 10 healing meditations that I've created to heal each of the motives, the hidden motives to survive. Another thing that people can do is they can download my 23 daily practices. You actually, when you sign up for it, you'll get a daily practice every day for 23 days. And that's just on my website, MatthewFerry.com. All my free stuff is there. And then I'm a pretty ravenous vlogger. And so if you go to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Matthew Ferry, you'll see I do a daily enlightenment there. And my goal with the daily enlightenment is to, especially right now, over this next year, so I just turned 51, and on my birthday, I began the daily enlightenments, and my goal is to every single day of my 51st year, I want to do a daily enlightenment. So that's certainly a way that you can start practicing as well. But just being a part of our group, coming and hanging out with us. I mean, if you come to our events, you'll see that it's just a bunch of people like you and me who are all committed to living in a quiet mind state and having an epic life. We want to live awesome. That's it. We want to live awesome.
Well, I think that's really a good start, those structures. I think one area where there might be a gap is for people that want to take a much deeper dive into your teachings, but for some reason or another,
That's our mastermind.
they're in a part of the world where they can't get to a live event.
Yeah, we have a mastermind that is specifically about that. I've been running my mastermind now for this is the we call it the Ignite Mastermind, but we've been running the mastermind now for 7 years straight, and that's the place where we practice. We put this into a practice over a year process, and it's one thing to go into enlightened states where you experience the incredible ecstasy and bliss and joy and peace. It's another thing to be able to keep it in your daily life. That's a completely different structure, and that's really what our mastermind's about. And I think long term, that's what the Center for Rapid Enlightenment is going to be about as well. It's going to be about the maintenance. How do we stay in the recognition that I'm in a thriving state? How do we stay there?
Have you thought much in your life or in your work about the socio-political economic implications of a society that would be resonant with human beings operating at this level?
I think that the people that you and I hang out with are on the leading edge of humanity, and I don't say that to make anyone feel special. That's not the point. But it's sort of like this: if we look at human being is the result of self-organization. So something in this background field of energy and information that we call the quantum field, there is a strong and weak force. That strong and weak force is organizing into the subatomic, quarks and photons and electrons, and it's organizing, more and more and more and more and more and more until you get to complex organisms like us, 75 trillion cells all operating together. And we've seen in science, a progression of greater states of complexity that have been occurring. We call that evolution. And human beings, we see our great avatars popping up periodically. So we'll see Krishna, Buddha, Jesus, etc. Right? They pop up, and it resets the course of humanity. We use muscle testing to distinguish, what was that? What happened? And one of the things that is a strengthening context is that humanity, as it organizes, there's a combination of both constructive and destructive forces that come together, and it produces an experience, and then it keeps building. But several times in our process, the destructive gets so strong that we now are going on a downhill slide, and then here comes a Jesus, boom, right? And knocks us back into, literally, saves our souls. That muscle test strong as corrected the system and got the system back on track for iterating.
Right.
Today, we can use muscle testing to discern that today there are about 4% of the population of the planet is operating in what would essentially be a love consciousness. And that is an extraordinary amount of people. But we're still on the leading edge. But that particular iteration of humanity seems to be an iteration of humanity that is focused on inner optimization. So we've mastered the outer world, and we won't stop mastering and seeking to master the outer world. But we've mastered the outer world, which has now created a platform for us to work on mastering the inner world. And so now it is a very common thing for people to be mastering their inner world, to say, all right, well, I have a house, I have food, I have children, I got all the stuff that I need. I'm actually in an okay place. Now the question is, why does my life suck? I have everything. My life sucks. I I have a job, I have a car, I have money, I have kids, I have a relationship. My life sucks. Now what? Now what is inner optimization? And what I am finding is that the external world is appearing to us. When I say us, I mean sort of the love-based consciousness people. It is appearing to be more volatile or more negative or more divisive. And while I'm sure we could create definitions that have that be the case, I'm going to propose that it is just that more and more people are waking up to inner optimization. And as we wake up to inner optimization, the same old shit that we've been doing, David, there's nothing new going on in the world, David. The same old stuff that we've been doing now appears to be more agitating. So as we as a species move from externalized optimization environment to internalized optimization being, the same old shtick that's happening out there in the world with politics and wars and greed and grab it while you can and all of that stuff is just progressively feeling worse to us. But simultaneously, it is healing and becoming more optimized by the day. And it is that contrast that is producing this incredible, insatiable desire for all of us. And when I say all of us, I mean those people that are sort of on the leading edge of humanity at this moment. It is causing us to be even more diligent about creating an amazing experience here on Earth, rather than trying to optimize the outer world to somehow influence the inner world. For us, we know that that doesn't work. We know that there's only so much stuff you can have to feel good. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a baseline. And once you have that, that's about it. And science has actually proven that you only need to have about $70,000 a year. And at about $70,000 a year, everything above that really doesn't create an equal amount of happiness increase. It really is about us optimizing our inner state. So let the world do what it's doing, David. It's perfect exactly as it is. It is what has been happening on the planet. It's just that this particular part of humanity, you and me and us, we are growing in strength, and the Aquarius is here.
Would you say that, like, I hear what you're saying, that it's always been there, and I get that. But one of the things I wonder about is whether, like, let me use an analogy in my field. If someone's been eating like crap, and then they start to eat high vibe food,
yeah,
it's going to trigger a detoxification process. And a lot of the poisons will come to the surface to be seen and released.
Yes.
I think that's an element also of, extrapolating it to the domains you were talking about. I think that's a part of what's happening too. So it's not just that it's always been there and now we have better eyes to see it. I think that's part of it. But I think another part of it is that even without better eyes to see it, because the vibe is rising, it's coming up to literally the surface. So it's easier to see. It's not just we're developing X-ray vision. It's literally easier to see because the poisons are literally coming up to the surface.
Well, when I muscle test that statement, it doesn't test strong. And so that doesn't mean that it's right or wrong. That just means I use muscle testing for one thing and one thing only, and that is to discern what is a strengthening context. And that's it, because in the end, there is no true, there is no false, there is no good, bad, right, or wrong. All the labels are a lie. So for me, what I am in a perpetual process of doing, what has given me great peace and inner strength, is to challenge everything, everything that I think, everything that I experience, everything that I say, everything that everybody else says, everything gets put to the test for me. Is that a strengthening context? And then if it's something interesting enough, I'll put it into the group of people who do testing and verification, which typically those are people in our mastermind, and we make sure that what we're testing is universal, like that everybody can corroborate and get the same results. But the thing that you're testing right now, or that you're saying, that doesn't test strong for me. So I'll just use my intuition to see if maybe there's a further clarification. With the X-ray vision, you become aware of more information that then creates a greater contrast. So while the toxicity response of cleansing and healing is certainly a thing, you want to think of the human species as one organism, not as separate. So as the consciousness raises in this small segment of the population, let's call it 4% of the population, as it goes up, and it's currently on an exponential. So it's currently going up, up really fast. As it is exponentially improving, as it's been going like this, and then all of a sudden it's starting to go, it's going up. As that happens, our awareness makes us way more uncomfortable.
Yes.
Just what we're aware of, right? So it's like you look under the hood and you're like, whoa.
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, in so many groups that I'm a part of on Facebook, people are talking about, oh my God, I can't watch television anymore. You know, oh my God, I can't go to parties anymore.
Yep.
So I totally get that.
Yes. That's my specialty. My perfect client is the person who is having the awareness that the old rules, the old society, the old way of operating, the old model, the old survival model isn't for them, and they want to find a new model. They want to be able to live in life. They want to participate fully in life and be completely at peace, totally open, and unaffected by the negativity in the world. And that is no easy task. That actually is a skill that you train yourself in. And it doesn't surprise me that groups that you're in are filled with people saying, I can't watch TV, I can't watch the news, I can't go to these parties. All of my old friends are in this degraded state. We're having a consciousness itself has found what I think this is the only thing that tests strong. So that doesn't mean, again, I just want to make sure our viewer understands, that doesn't mean that it's true. It just means that it's optimized, it's fortifying. So the only thing that we're seeing is that there is a new successful iteration of humanity that is beginning to take ground. And that successful iteration of humanity is inner optimization versus external optimization. So it's like you're on the platform of the externalized optimization, food, shelter, blah, 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 right? But now on that platform, there's this new version of human, and this new version of human, we saw it really coming out in the 60s, and it's just been growing and growing and growing. This new version of human is like, wait a second, you know where it's at. It's on the inside. It's not on the outside. And it's not a choice that any of us have, David. It's
Oh,
not
for
a choice.
sure.
We just are that way.
Sure. I'm just saying that that this, whatever you want to call it, human 4.0 or whatever, that this human that's operating at this higher level of consciousness, that part of that authentic self-expression for that human being living in the world is experimenting and exploring new rules and new structures at all levels, not just at the level of
Everywhere.
relationships, but also at the level of groups, organizations, businesses,
Yep.
communities, the money game, everything. And that as long as that's evolving organically as an expression of authenticity and uh, not as a compensation, that movement, that natural movement of life in true motion, that is an area of major interest to me.
Yeah, and we can't fault people for tripping up into inauthenticity and being triggered and saying, you know, I'm here to make a difference in the world. I'm going to transform money. And then, you know, if we did a real investigation and we looked for the hidden motives and we looked for the unconscious reflexes, we would find that at the source of that is some kind of greed and insecurity that is being masked by high conscious ideas. You know, we need to let that play out.
I totally agree. I
We don't
totally
make it
agree.
wrong. But it's pretty exciting that a new way to compensate for your insecurity is to do a high-minded thing. That's pretty awesome.
But I'm talking about something else. I'm talking about authentic self-expression. I'm talking about where you're not, where what's driving your desire to explore alternate financial systems isn't coming from a compensation, but it's coming as a natural expression of love. I'm saying that's a possible. I'm saying
what you're
that's
talking about, David, is an enlightened state.
yes, and I'm saying that's a possibility. I'm saying that action at the level of group or organization or community doesn't have to be compensatory. I'm saying
Action
that
at the
that's
level of group.
I'm saying that's possible.
I get it. We may be, you know, several hundred years away from what you're talking about. It may take many more iterations of human beings to get there. But let's just be honest. The group, organization, money, the structures of life are survival structures. They are structures that are designed to improve survival. So there are some structures whereby adding an enlightened perspective may actually cause it to malfunction. And there are other structures whereby you add some enlightened perspectives and it's some blend. So with my children, raising children is a survival process, period. Therefore, it is rational for me to utilize some survival frameworks and then sprinkle in the enlightened frameworks to assist me in having a better experience about being a survival monkey.
I get what you're saying. I think I'd like to continue this conversation more privately.
Yeah.
Because it may not be that relevant to a lot of people.
Great.
But the only thing I want to say is that because of nested contexts, I don't think it needs to be polarized as an either or the way I was hearing you say it.
Yeah.
But I hear you. I hear you. And I appreciate the opportunity
it's kind of like this, David. I'm just going to sum it up in this way.
Yeah.
All is well, my friend. The way that it is perfect exactly as it is. And the only thing that makes it imperfect is our description. That's it. So if we are able to describe it in a way that is empowering, where we're not being stupid and we're not trying to bury our head in the sand, but we're dealing with it exactly as it is, rather than exactly as we would experience it through our distortion to the best of our ability, then transformation begins to occur. But it begins to occur at the level of us.
Yeah.
When we transform our relationship to government, to money, to finance, to the debt system, to our relationships on the planet, when we transform our own relationship to those things, then we are at a state of peace. And in that peace, we are authentic. And in our authenticity, we then have a compulsion. And the compulsion will be maybe to do something about government, maybe not.
That's what I'm saying.
The moment we interact with government, we will instantaneously be pulled into a survival state. And that is where the skill set of being able to distinguish the hidden motives, the drunk monkey, to utilize your strong and weak, to discern things and to recontextualize, it becomes paramount, because it's easy to be peaceful by yourself.
And that's what excites me so much about your work, because it's my direct experience that as we are willing and able to take more responsibility for ourselves as reflected in these larger and larger dynamics, exactly what you're saying happens. That the bigger you're willing and able to be, the more a new level of survival patterning gets triggered, and the whole process reiterates at another level of the spiral. And to participate with other people in community that have an appreciation for all of that, combined with the distinctions and tools and awarenesses that make up your work, that's thrilling to me personally. That's really exciting, because it makes it, in my mind, the way I'm wired now, for lack of a better word, this doesn't quite capture it. Maybe you have a better word for it. It gives me hope, or it gives me a sense of certainty that there is a route to take that possibility and turn it into an actuality.
In regards to having a more utopian society, is that what we're talking about?
A society where the structures that either don't exist anymore, or there's new ones, or they're operating very differently, are not designed to support scarcity, fear, polarization, duress, coercion.
Yeah.
And that in other words, there's so many people I know on the path that have spent decades working on themselves as an individual, or working on themselves at the level of their intimate relationships or their close friendships. And they've just accepted it as a given that the structures in larger corporations or in society are just going to suck, and you got to make the best of it. And there's something in me that says no to that. There's something in me that says, no, we can keep going. That there are octaves of self-expression that in the same way that we transform the quality of our intimate relationships, that we can continue to explore and discover who we need to be and what we need to do to transform the quality of the groups that we're a part of, the organizations, the communities. And what I am excited about is that if you take that vision and you combine it with the distinctions and skill sets that your work brings to the table, something clicks inside of me. Like, it's like I consider myself a practical visionary. It's like if there's a treasure inside of a safe and the safe has a lock on it and it's a combination lock and you need these 7 numbers in this particular order to be able to open the door and get to the treasure. There's something about you and your work that's one of those numbers for me, that it's real for me now that that door to that treasure can be opened and accessed, not only for many more people, but also in this dynamic that this other, and if we're building a matrix here, this other aspect of the matrix, which is, you know, what some schools of thought call the dynamics, where you have self as individual, relationship, group, organization, community, culture. There's something powerful going on here where I see that more and more people, it'll be real to more and more people like it's real to me now. That no, you don't have to settle for a life where you've carved out this wonderful sense of self as an individual and you've carved out this wonderful relationship or this wonderful group, but in a river that's polluted and it sucks. And that's the best we can do. I don't buy that.
Well, I am assisting many executives at very large corporations and CEOs on Wall Street at this time. And some of my most successful clients have created companies that have kindness and peace at their core values, and they literally that's how they think about things. And so those companies do exist. I've been working on some of the big companies on Wall Street for a long time to assist the executives that I'm working with in utilizing the inner optimized process rather than the old school survival process of greed and force. So it is happening. It's happening right now. There are many of us, David, who are essentially underground. We're operating in the biggest corporations in the world. We're I think in some ways if we're having a covert operation occur because the society at large has not yet fully embraced the idea that being in a joyous, peaceful state is more creative, collaborative, powerful, resourceful than being in a stressed, agitated, forceful state. Those old pillars of how we got things done are, we're only 20, 30 years out of when that was the only way you did it. You only did it through force and manipulation, right? So we're just at the beginning of this transformation. And I request that you don't worry about it. Instead, you know and you trust that it's happening. That if you think it's happening, if you have the desire for it to be happening, that's not because you have the desire. That's because the energy and information in the field is literally recognizing that there's a more effective way, and it's coming through so many of us. Yeah. And what there is to do is to trust that it is happening. And then if you feel compelled to do something about it, then do it. If you don't feel compelled to do something about it, then release your concern about it, because your concern about it is the drunk monkey who is forecasting the negative and trying to fix a future you're not going to do anything about.
Oh, absolutely. No, I'm very moved to be part of the solution at that level. And what I'm saying is, and it has something to do with the way that I'm wired, there's something about you, and there's something about this conversation, and there's something about our relationship that is opening up for me that knowingness that not only it can happen, but that it is happening. And I think one of the things that is attractive to me about you is that you are comfortable interacting with people who have positions of power at that level, at the level of these larger companies, and people that have that kind of worldly influence. Just knowing that there's a Matthew Ferry that is doing that now is useful to me. And you know, I understand the need for, or the skillful means of it being somewhat stealth right now. I totally understand that. And I respect that. And that's perfect. I get that. And so, you know, I don't know if this conversation has helped you to understand me better, but it certainly helped me to know you better, to know you more deeply, and to understand where our deep alignment, where that's all about for me. So that's really been great. And as we bring this conversation to a close, I'm very excited. I mean, it's been raw and real, and I love that. And I think we've done a really good job in terms of, if you look at this as a 9-inning ball game, I think we've done a really good job here in the first inning of setting a tone, giving people a sense of who you are, what your work is all about, maybe some of the things that make it distinct from other people's work, some of the things that are possible. We've given people some really easy, low gradient ways to get to know you and your work better. As we move towards ending this conversation, I want to make sure that you have all the time you need to share anything you want to share to powerfully complete this for yourself and to serve our viewers and our listeners.
I think that the most important thing for people to begin with is to set your intention. And what I have found is that when you set your intention for enlightened consciousness to flow through and to experience the purity of your own consciousness, it sets the tone for the day. And one of the things that we often forget to do as high conscious individuals is we often forget to begin our process with where we're headed. What is my outcome? What is the intention that I'm going to be living inside of today, in this moment, for this meeting, with my kids, going to school, right? Whatever it is that you're going to do that day. And the thing that I have found to be extraordinarily transformational, something that I learned from one of my other mentors, Lane Lowry, and that is to focus on the intention for enlightened consciousness. So I would say it like this: please set the intention for enlightened consciousness to flow through, to experience the purity of my own consciousness, and to know that all is well. Please release my need for things to be different, to accept and embrace people, life, and circumstances exactly as it is. Please set the intention to practice total and complete acceptance of all people, in all situations, at all times, including myself. And I find that when I do some variation of that particular intention, it just realigns me and gets me back to a place where, oh, I can see the drunk monkey now. Oh, there's a hidden motive to hide myself. Oh, there I go again. I'm reacting to this situation, as if I'm in a survival situation, and I can step back and reconnect with the recognition that the source of life in me is the source of life for everyone and everything, that we're all one thing expressing itself with infinite variety, and that there's nothing bad going on out there in the world. It's just stuff that may be degrading to me. It may be that I don't like it, but it doesn't make it bad. And if I'm willing to accept it, the moment that I practice that acceptance is the moment that it transforms. And when it transforms, I feel delight. I feel uplifted and joyous because in some way I've maintained dominion over my own existence and my own being.
Indeed. For people, you had mentioned that in your book, you write about 6 of the 12, what do you call them?
Unconscious reflexes.
How can people learn about all 12 of them?
If they go to meetthedrunkmonkey.com, they can check out a little site that Kristen has made there to talk all about the drunk monkey. Meetthedrunkmonkey.com, and you can also do some Googling. You can just Google Matthew Ferry, the drunk monkey, and you should get things that are not monkeys drinking beer.
Okay, so in review, for people that want to connect with your work, could you give out one more time website URLs or anything else that, just one more time for people to access your work?
I think the best thing to do is to go to MatthewFerry.com, MatthewFerry.com. There you have my blog. You have all my free tools, connections to our Facebook groups. Everything that we do is there. And I think that's the best place to start.
Now, do they have the option there to go to the motives page, or they have to know about the motives page?
MatthewFerry.com/motives, but I believe that it's on the site somewhere.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Matthew. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening or watching another edition of Freeing the Body, Freeing the Soul. As always, I'm your host, Dr. David, the Cutting Edge Doc, and here on Freeing the Body, Freeing the Soul, we do in-depth interviews with individuals that are doing cutting-edge work in the areas of healing, spirituality, and social transformation. I'm so grateful for this show, so grateful for you, so grateful for Matthew, and his words of wisdom at the end especially. And with that, we'll close with love and peace. Bye for now.